Well, I have the children out for volleyball, volleyball. And it wasn't bad, but so she told me it was fun. Sometimes it touches. We just came in with paper and made that one. Oh, good.
When I came in that day, tractors on the side of the road, and it was like leaning like this. So somehow he pulled off at some point and almost tipped it and probably just stopped, got out. And then called in the tow truck.
Scared to move anymore.
Yeah, yeah, it looked like it was gonna tip up, plus the wind. Out of the south.
One more.
It was tipping that way. And they shut down the highway yesterday.
Oh, wow. Mike's
Yeah.
turn around there. You went out there.
Yeah, it's hers.
Oh, yeah, nice to see you. Yeah, we met before.
Yeah.
Myra, nice to meet
You
you.
got my,
I said, anybody in there? Especially with. People that are here. Mike, wait till watch myself there. Yeah.
waiting for one. I know too. I have them. It says, these are the, go ahead.
He's gonna go on architecture. Chris was. About 3 weeks ago. Patches were still snow. It wasn't more Sue, I've known you for years. Did you get anything else from Strider and Keith?
See, it's one of my family names, but I just.
But that's my.
And that's my daughter's. Yeah, we'll keep the middle of 5 acres.
No.
Well,
Until we're hearing.
Yeah.
So.
Checked out because
We're open for.
Number 8. Yeah, I'm ready to.
Not as bad, but it's still by trash.
I'm gonna run it by reading.
They have. One Saturday, some numbers.
Yeah, unfortunately, we left all of our with Harrison because we couldn't transform.
And election, all that. Yeah, some limbs on the roof of the first cottage, yeah. Cut off and. Yeah, they grow well. Did you? Yeah. Yeah, started collecting water and closed all the valves. Yeah.
You made it. You're not the last one, Mike, right? Oh, you're sure.
Last year.
Yeah.
Just sorry. Like Iowa or something like that.
Oklahoma.
I see yours.
I guess we-
I wanted to move somewhere that was a little more conservative or more. No. So. Yeah. It's been nice. We don't have any more.
All right, Mike made it. Okay, well, we're gonna get started here. This is the April Solid Waste Advisory Committee meeting. Thanks everyone for coming. I'm gonna start with roll call. Paul Rutana,
Here.
Jared Black, Jared, is that you? We see a Jared logged in. Jared Black, is that Jared Black that's logged in? Your microphone's muted. Luke Dines. I don't see Luke logged in or here. Ed Fitch. Ed, Cassie Lacey.
Here.
Erica Lindberg.
Here.
Chris Ogren.
Bruce Ogren's here.
Thank you. Mike Riley.
Here.
Aaron Swetnam cannot make it today. He has something else going on. And Robin Bora.
Yep.
Okay, we do have a quorum.
Yeah, and I'm here as well, Keith Caceres.
Oh, I'm sorry, Keith, that I skipped you there. My apologies.
No problem.
All right, okay. All right, so we do have a quorum for the meeting today. Next item on the agenda is review and approval of March meeting minutes. Do you want to present your comments? Rob?
Yeah, I just have one sentence, I guess I've commented for several months now that having I forget how many this for whatever scoring criteria. Each with such a small amount, will mask one or two criteria is really important in overriding. So I think what I said, I just made a little edit in these notes. Is Robin Bora expresses concern about the scoring and it being useful. And since the scoring with so many factors may mask major advantages and disadvantages of the site. I think that was what I said. It was just a little edit.
Okay, we'll make that adjustment. Any other comments, corrections to the meeting minutes? You have a motion to accept the meeting minutes as amended.
So move.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Mike made the first, who made the second?
Robin,
Thank you.
So the next item on the agenda is public comment. Cover the comment, the sign up sheet there. So we are going to be limiting comments to 3 minutes per person. We've got some things to go over today, and Tim and I do have a meeting downtown. We have to get you right after this, so we want to stay on schedule for this. So first person is Ryan. Is it Ocker?
right here,
And how do you spell that, Ryan?
Byron, B-Y-R-O-N, Ocker's last name, E-U-K-E-R.
I just couldn't decipher this.
I'm a property owner in Milliken Valley. I've been out there for over a couple of decades. I've seen a lot of change out there. I'm just in opposition of a landfill out there. I think there's actually a poor site location. One of the things about Milliken, it's very much known for its wind. We have really extreme wind conditions out there. One of the reasons why there's no trees growing in Milliken Valley floor is because it's completely windswept. I just have like a little chart here I'd like to share. This is a kind of showing wind speed, wind direction, and wind gusts. Right here is a band. This is showing winds going from about 15 to 25 miles an hour sustained wind. This is in about from 10 in the morning till about midnight. So that's about 14 hours of just. Now, in between here, you have wind gusts. Those are going from 25 to about 40 miles an hour for during that 12-hour period. There's even some in the like 45 mile an hour range. This is pretty common. This is like a very common type of wind events that happen out here. Other wind events that happen out there are thermals, dust devils. Paragliding community knows that's always the first warning about flying out there is thermals, dust devils. You would have just a really hard time controlling any sort of styrofoam bags and all that. Often these are flowing out of the southwest, flowing directly into the highway. Also not far away from power lines, blowing there. Super high voltage, if anything got in there would probably be vaporized pretty quick, but I'm sure the utilities wouldn't be too stoked on garbage blowing into their towers and their power lines and stuff. Let's see. Yeah, and I think it's just a poor site location, kind of bad design. And I just don't think it's a good spot for a landfill. Another thing, I know recreation, maybe you might dismiss that a lot, but it is very important to protect recreation areas, especially if you have websites like visitbend.com that really sell Bend as this outdoor recreational playground. To take an area that's used by a bunch of different people doing different types of recreation and put a landfill right in it is a little kind of absurd to me. And yeah, that's about all you gotta say.
Okay, thank you, Byron. If you would like to submit comments in writing to us, we're not transcribing, we are recording these
Okay.
minutes, the meeting, but we are not transcribing. So if you want to submit comments, including your wind chart there.
Sure.
That would be helpful.
Also, I'd like to add one more thing. If you want to get an idea what this could look like with the wind and trash, go to YouTube and type in wind blowing trash or anything that has to do with wind in a landfill. And it would be, it's a disaster. It's just a complete environmental, logistic, just, it would be just horrible. It would be really bad. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Byron. Daniel Baca.
Hi, Daniel Baca. Didn't speak the last one, which is weird. My main question for speaking today, it pertains to the BLM site, and maybe you guys are gonna answer my questions here in a bit with presentation on that. But it also pertains to all the other sites. And you guys have talked about fast tracking, on ramping the BLM site, and I don't know if anybody's even here representing that because they haven't even been informed about that. And my main question is, have you guys done any outreach to the folks and the people near the BLM site? And what is the proximity of people's houses and wells and homes to this site? Because that's been my main contention and point about all the sites is that trying to put a landfill a quarter mile from somebody's house or well just seems like a ridiculous idea. But I do appreciate your guys' work on the previous meeting where you showcased the definite mileage distances from the main proposed sites that are still in contention. So thank you very much for that input. Parametrics, I'm assuming you guys are the ones that did that. Very helpful. In regards to the BLM site, maybe a solution can be a financial compensation, or even in the other sites, the proximity to closer you are to said landfill. If you're within the 1 mile zone, you get a certain dollar amount. As you progress farther out, you get more financial. And I realize that's not necessarily in your guys' scope to make that decision, but it could potentially be a committee recommendation, which would have a lot more weight in regards to how it's proceeded in the future. Because one of the points about the BLM site is that you're talking about buying it for $15 an acre. And yes, there's a savings to the committee purchasing it, sorry, the landfill purchasing it, but yet the folks living next to it are getting screwed over. Same with the Milliken site, which is, and the other one person that lives next to the Moon Pit site. Anyways, that's what I got going on. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Daniel. Steve Wright. Sorry.
Hi there, I'm
Yeah,
Steve
go ahead.
Wright. I'm a landowner in Milliken. And just want to let you know, I'm opposed to the Milliken sites or the both Roth sites. There is a small community of residents out there, and there's about 130 tax lots. They're mostly private properties. Most all these people bought their lands before this proposed landfill came in there. There are not a lot of people out there, but there are people. People are super important. And also, there's lots of wildlife. There's the sage grouse, there's antelope herds that frequent that area. I am against it for many reasons, but also the visual impacts, the odors, the garbage flying around, the negative health effects. The other thing is Pine Mountain itself, it's, most of the snowpack, I believe, is going to be on its northeast side. And as that drains and as it melts, it's going to feed right into that Roth East, the eastern Roth site, and go through all those drainages there before it, feeds into the ancient Lake Milliken area where the aquifer is. So just want to let you know I'm against it. And please, no landfills in Milliken.
Thanks, Steve. Okay, we get back to sharing screen.
You want to see if there's anybody,
Oh, anybody online care to make any comments?
you might want to highlight the attendees to see if there's somebody in the conversation.
Please raise your hand if you want to speak.
Going once, twice. Move on with the presentation. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So a little bit of an update on Pine Mountain Observatory. We did have a meeting with them about 3 weeks ago. And they, although they would prefer that we use it, we go to another site. If we do move forward with the Ross site, we will have to do quite a bit of collaboration and considerations for Pine Mountain Observatory. I'm going to kind of go out of sequence here. So the mitigation concepts for Pine Mountain area concerns, a lot of people made comments about lighting, and what we anticipate, regardless where the facility is built, there will likely be 2 buildings on the site, an employee facility, break room, restroom, showers, things like that, and an equipment maintenance building. And any lighting that's going to be going there is strictly what is required by code, which is lighting at doorways. So whatever lighting fixture can go in will be downlighting it. I don't envision necessarily the lighting be any greater than some of the other lighting you see in the Milliken Valley when you're driving along. Again, 2 buildings, lighting at man doors, and that's it. There is no field lighting or flood lighting at all anywhere on the site. So we presented that to Pine Mountain. The lighting was one of their 3 top concerns, and they seem to be fairly satisfied with that approach there. We also discussed dust emissions with them. Not Landfill does have a Title V permit. It's a federal air quality permit, and there are dust emission limitations on the landfill. Those same rules would likely, they will apply at the new facility. Certainly best management practices such as paving roads, the long-term permanent roads will be paved on the site. And we get pretty aggressive here during the summertime, especially around the fire-free program, to apply magnesium chloride to our roads. It's the same product that the county uses for dust control on all their unpaved roads that they have to maintain. And certainly on a site like that, we would be doing that application on a fairly regular basis. So those are kind of the mitigations we discussed with Pine Mountain on dust emissions. The third, no, go ahead, please.
Does all the moving, all the work besides roads within the landfill create a lot of dust?
If there was excavation work going on, for example, with a scraper, those haul roads would be either water or magnesium chloride applied for dust control. I'm not going to say there's not going to be dust emissions from the site, but there's certainly best management practices to keep that to a minimum. And we did ask Pine Mountain about what they see from the OHV activity out there, and they said they can see that sweeping up the face of the mountain there, and at times it does impact their viewing opportunities. So we discussed this with them. The mitigation approaches that are kind of standard for a landfill or any large construction project. It's something to apply. The third area of concern is a turbulence coming off of a flare operation, and that's going to require some consideration whether there's some engineering approaches to the flare itself for mitigating the turbulence emissions coming off of the flare is something we would have to deal with down the road with it. A couple of general comments regarding the Pine Mountain Observatory that we had with them. The site is over 4.5 miles from either of the Roth sites. And the observatory itself is actually shielded by the topography of the area. They wouldn't have a direct view of the lighting. It was interesting, one comment they made is something out of Christmas Valley that is lit up very brightly that they actually have a line of sight view from. They actually set up a temporary screen of some sort up at the observatory to block that visible light. But with the Roth sites, they are tucked down below the ridge line from the view from the Pine Mountain area. And again, like I said, they would prefer we use another site, but if the Roth site ends up being the site of choice, we would certainly have to collaborate with them on mitigation of light, dust, and emission or turbulence emissions from the flare station.
When we were standing at Roth East looking up, it looked like, up that drainage, possibly you could see the observatory, but they confirmed, no.
Right, yeah, this image is a little bit distorted because the observatory itself is actually sitting below the ridge line off in the distance above the observatory location. So they actually don't have a line of sight view from what we were able to discern from them when we were meeting with them.
Yeah, I mean, I walked to the top. You could see it. I've been up there before. It's distorted.
Yeah. No, it's when you're using street view, you try to tilt it, it kind of flattens all that out. Yes.
How would you guys mitigate adverse effects, heat emissions? What techniques would you use to mitigate the flares?
Well, that's something we would have to explore. I did a little bit of search on that with and they focus primarily on emissions from refineries burning VOCs, and those do have a different. It was more the chemical emissions, so we would have to explore that. I do not know what those would be. Maybe some kind of baffle system or running the exhaust through some kind of a system to cool it. The flare end on landfill is an open flare. We would have to put an enclosed flare on the site, so the burn would actually be down at the bottom of a rather tall stack, and whether some kind of baffling or ventilation system at the top would help cool that or disperse those emissions. That's something we just will have to explore down the road.
So, and that's an incinerator for trash?
No, it is a flare for burning landfill gas. We are not allowed to emit methane from the landfill above about 100 parts per million. We do a survey every 90 days that requires about 35 miles of walking on the site, sniffing the ground out there. Those same standards would apply at any landfill that's going in Oregon. So we have to deal with the methane. And quite possibly the flare would not be a 100-year operation. Methane has value, it's natural gas. So ideally, sometime down the road, we would partner with a developer for getting a beneficial use from the gas, which is something we're actually going to be doing here in our landfill in the coming couple of years.
Will the flaring be only during the daytime?
No, that's a 24/7 operation. And again, the flare itself, the flame will not be visible. Again, that will be an enclosed flare. It basically it's all stacked with a burner at the very bottom. Unlike at not landfill, it's stacked with a burner at the top and no shrouding around it.
Do you have an idea about how tall that stack would be?
Now, the ones I've seen generally run about 20, maybe 30 feet tall. Yeah. We had a question. Yeah.
Yeah, do they even use that observatory much anymore?
They do during the season, they can get up there. However, they're just making investments now to have a remote automated system where they can actually do a lot of their work from Corvallis or here in Bend. So there's a caretaker up there during the winter time, but there's no actual activity going on up there. But that will be changing when they get this automated system.
Well, it's 20 years old, so what, 20 years ago, things were a lot different.
Yeah, they've made a lot of investment over the years. I believe they said just in the past year, they've made a couple $1 million investment in some data technology there and have added a solar observatory as well there. Yeah. So even though the site use is 20 years old, they're keeping up with technology for what they do.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next item on the agenda is the BLM site. So I'm going to give a kind of a brief update on this. And with Daniel Bach's comment, so we are very early in a process that is going to be rather tenuous here. So we are meeting with Commissioner Chang after this meeting to discuss this. We had discussed it with the other two commissioners over the past week, and at some point we will be doing notifications to the neighbors to this. So we met with BLM. I think I shared that at the prior meeting, and there's two basic tracks we can go. The Recreation Public Purposes Act authorizes the BLM to grant land to public agencies for beneficial uses, whether it's recreational landfill or anything else a public agency might want to use. And again, that process takes 6 to 10 years, so that does not fit well in our timeline. The approach that the commissioners are going to be taking is that they've actually reached out to all of our federal elected officials, congressmen represent the state of Oregon. And again, we'll be finding out what the latest on that is. In theory, they can go through a process legislatively that would pass a law that would authorize the BLM to grant land directly to the county. So there's still a lot of substantial hurdles in this process here. And at some point in the not too distant future, we will be doing notification. We'll give you a little more detail on what we've found so far on the BLM site that we're giving consideration to when we get to that part of the presentation. So again, there's been some direct contacts made with legislative officials, and we'll see what kind of traction that gets. We were reminded that next year is an election year. That plays pretty big into any kind of action that the politicians do, so that could delay that process further.
Would it be helpful to just make sure everybody in the room knows where this is, right?
Yes.
So between Bend and Redmond.
I can't see it.
Highway 97.
You can see the solar panels in the upper left quadrant there, and Highway 97 to the left of that. So you can see in reference to that, and Deschutes Junction is just south out of the view on the picture here.
And that's Pronghorn, just on the right-hand side.
Yeah, Pronghorn's about 1.5 miles away, so.
You can actually see the golf course of Pronghorn there, not right.
Yeah, right.
Maybe in response to Daniel's question, could you point out the neighbors maybe?
Well, yeah, we will. And we get some
And the
signs.
2 airport.
Yeah, and the airport buffers look at us to kind of focus on this area as well as an area on the east side on the Calvi Highway side, so. So that's the update. It's kind of in the very, very early stages of process that is very tenuous, and we'll see where that takes us. we get down the road with this, it's out of our hands completely.
So is this the only site we're focusing on, BLM site, or we still keeping other ones open?
BLM asked us to focus on a single site. Okay. So this was the one we felt that was the best of the three that we developed.
But I suppose if we came up with a real red flag on this, we could still consider the others too.
Possibly, yes, yeah. And again, it's early in the process, we can probably shift gears to that. if we need to. Yeah. Steve?
Chad, will the folks at Pronghorn, given that the prevailing winds are from the southwest, are they gonna scream like a mashed cat when they think about, we're gonna be smelling this landfill?
I would expect they would. Tim and I get reminded repeatedly that Pronghorn is a not too distant neighbor. The question is how far away is far enough? That's individual interpretation from residents. Yeah, so we would expect to hear from Pronghorn, yeah. There's no perfect site.
I think we have a lot of people living a lot closer than a mile and a half around that landfill.
I was thinking about that yesterday. We should have run that number, but not landfill was here before the community developed around it. But I would expect that there are more residents around not landfill than even what we'll see in the residential analysis on the BLM site.
And in terms of complaints, you should have a record about the smell.
Oh, we do, yeah. We're required to record those and report them to the, and in the past year, we've had maybe 2 over complaints. Either people are resigned to our existence here, or I like to think we're doing a pretty good job. We were challenged with odor complaints a number of years ago when they converted the composting operation, and through some engineering controls, that those complaints pretty well went away because we got a good handle on the odor issues.
Could you just identify on the map which property and kind of where you think the cells would be?
Yeah, so that amber that Ryan is running the cursor around, that is the BLM property we would acquire. The county does own some land, but a portion of it is inside the 5-mile buffer. That certainly could be used for ancillary facilities like equipment maintenance or maybe material recovery facilities, stuff like that. But the landfill proper would be somewhere in that amber colored polygon there. That's roughly 400 acres. Again, we're looking at about 250 acres on that. So the BLM suggested we take a larger bite than we think we need. So we kind of had to line at about 400 acres there.
Have you put your circles there to see how many houses are within a mile?
You'll see that in a later.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And you're gonna talk about zone 1 versus 3.
Yeah. Touch on that.
Yeah, so just a little bit of history back again on the BLM process. So we initially the BLM has 3 levels of property. So zone 3 is land that the BLM has identified for disposal, meaning landfill disposal, meaning it's land that they would gladly part with. And the zone 3 properties in Deschutes County were either not in a good location for us, were too small, or just were not configured properly to be able to build a functional landfill on. So zone 3 dropped out of contention back in 2017 or so. Zone 2 and 3 are land that zone 2, I don't have full handle what zone 2 means. If you can elaborate on that. Exchange. So zone 2 is land that would work through the Recreation and Public Purposes Act for exchange or consolidation through the BLM. It requires that 6 to 10 year process. Zone 1 land, which all of this is around here, including the polygon we've identified, is land that the BLM wants to retain. They have no interest in passing it on. But then again, this legislative process would work around that and then allow it to be passed on to the county if we're successful with that.
So if they went through, if it wasn't for the legislative process, they'd have to amend their plan as well as do NEPA.
Exactly.
On the land.
Yeah. I'm not sure how viable acquiring zone 1 land through the RPPA is actually, because that land's identified in their plans for retention.
Yeah, they just have to amend it. And it's viable, but like I said, BLM takes a while.
Yeah, and there's plenty of pitfalls in the process as well.
Yeah, later you'll see the outline of the disposal site that's proposed, and just a few constraints I'd like to point out. There's obviously the 5-mile buffer that we've mentioned a couple times.
that initially identified this as a pocket. There's also the transitional surface, which is a part of the airport safety overlay zone related to the Redmond Airport. And landfills aren't allowed within that or beyond this red line, and so that provides a boundary there. There's also a transmission line north-south, and then what appears to be a smaller power line running east-west. And so that provides, or that serves as kind of the southern boundary of the site. So
There's a transmission line just to the east of the boundary there that we're seeing.
Yeah, see that kind of clear line.
yep, that's it.
It is big enough.
And it's a Pacific Power.
I don't know if that's Pacific Power or Bonneville Power.
Yeah.
We do anticipate access would come from Pleasant Ridge Road with a rail crossing around here on the county land.
And you wouldn't have to impact that Redmond, or state land.
Be 500 feet, yeah, 500 feet for a buffer from private property. So yeah, it'd be south of there. Okay, so per the request of the SWAC last month, we brought the BLM site into the focus site screening process to see it in context with the other sites, running it through the same process of criteria scoring, qualitative cost factor analysis, and residential proximity analysis. That said, it has a lot of unique obstacles for its acquisition, permitting, development, all of that. And so it has those obstacles, but thought it would be useful to see it in line with the other sites to see how it performs against the same or through the same focus site screening process. So just a quick overview. You've seen a lot of these slides already. We'll just fly through, but we'll explain how the BLM site fits into all of that. You can see these are the 5 sites that we've looked at so far. DSL sites out near Hampton, 2 Roth sites, the Moon Pit site, and then now the Highway 97 BLM site up here. We talked about Moon Pit before. And just curious from the SWAC, who all was able to visit Moon Pit site? Yeah, it was pretty interesting to get there on site. We also visited the Roth West site, as well as the Roth East site. And again, I'm flying through this because we talked about all this in the last meeting, and nothing's new here. And then also the Roth East sites were visited on that site tour. We had 2 separate tours out there for SWAC members to get boots on the ground. The DSL South site, DSL North site, and just a reminder with these acquisition potential can be very challenging due to the ownership by the Division of State Lands, and the properties are encumbered by existing grazing land leases and sage grouse candidate conservation agreement with assurances with U.S. Fish and Wildlife. So there's some difficulties there. In addition, the distance is pretty substantial. We experienced that even just the drive out to Milliken Valley was a bit of a haul. And, going even further to Hampton, I believe that'd be over an hour's drive. Also, Tim, did you want to mention some of the concerns with the site and staffing and just the distance?
Well, part of the operational challenge would be getting staff to be able to get to that site to work it. I don't know how large a population base out there is, but for existing staff, that would be very difficult.
And then now the Highway 97 BLM site we brought in here. Acquisition potential could be challenging due to ownership by BLM, as Chad discussed earlier. Property area identified here is 578 acres with 256 acre disposal footprint. Access is assumed to be via Pleasant Ridge Road with most likely an at-grade crossing right here. There are alternate routes that could be considered, but this one has the least haul route impacts to residences.
And that's cross county on land now.
There, per our initial analysis, which is just based on situs addresses, and wasn't yet vetted down to, about developed residences. It was initially 72 situs addresses within 1 mile and 895 residences, not residents, situs addresses within 2 miles. We'll show that another slide later on residential proximity analysis. There are existing wells and residences nearby, but none within a 1/4 mile. It's adjacent to the solar farm to the north, and the resident gun club directly to the north there. And then, as mentioned, Pronghorn to the east, approximately 1.5 miles. No known wells or water rights on site. There's power infrastructure available to the south, west, and east near the site periphery. And it's approximately 11 miles from the way centrally. So that's a big benefit for.
Are there any known future land uses that are coming to this area? Developments.
That's a good question. You wanna answer that one?
No, the BLM did share with us that there is a solar project under development that would basically be between the Van Roden Gun Club and Pronghorn. That's the only other development, but I believe it was Commissioner Adair did share with us that, the county is looking at the whole District Junction area for future development, whether that's residential, commercial, or what, but it's kind of down the road, one of the ideal development locations for further public uses, residential and commercial use.
And rural industrial, I think was mentioned. as well.
Yeah, rural industrial, that's right. Yeah.
So even the BLM is zone 1, they can still clear up all the junipers if it's solar.
We're not involved with that. I have no idea how that process works. Yeah, they shared that concept with us when we met with them, but how that process works from them, from a permitting and land use process, that's not something we're planning.
So now we'll take a look at how BLM sites scored in comparison to the other sites for each of the criteria categories. So for site characteristics and engineering, it scored well, but not the best. Some of the main drawbacks for this site would be development. The soils are shallow soil and deep basalt, which is very difficult for excavating landfill cells, and wouldn't likely provide a very good mix of soil for landfill operations. Topography was also scored very low because the site is relatively flat and not hidden from view and doesn't provide much topographic benefit in terms of containing landfill and providing.
Where would the view be from? It seems like it's far enough away from where anybody is sitting, like there's no hill to look down.
There is
There is.
Longview to the west,
No.
goes up several hundred feet, and folks on the east side of Longview could see it.
That's the view that's just to the northwest.
Yeah.
North of Tumalo Road. And then from Pronghorn, we've been looking from different angles and even some Zillow listings. There's a chance a drone photo could pick it up, but from the ground level, could be difficult. I mean, given that it's so flat there's a lot of juniper screening in between. Depends, of course, on how high the site ends up going and the economics of excavating versus filling above grade. And there's also some questions about whether the rock could be utilized as a resource. There are some obstacles to securing a mining permit there and setting that up for essentially economic reuse of the aggregate to offset the excavation costs. So a lot of unknowns there, but it's scored low, assuming that there wouldn't be a beneficial use to all that rock that would be excavated. It did score well in terms of haul distance to Waste Centroid, as you can imagine, being the closest site to the Waste Centroid. And annual precipitation is low, so much less leaching to deal with and manage there. Kind of jumping around.
going back up, geotechnical location factors are generally pretty good. No fault hazards, vicinity or seismic impact zones. Ownership's tricky. That was given a 2. Because it is, yeah, because the factors we mentioned. Yeah, site acreage is good, number of parcels is good. So scored okay in this category, but didn't really shine as a winner, so to speak. Now in natural environment,
What's the distance to Moon Pit from the central? This is 11 miles.
I can jump back up here. I think it's 15 or 20. Sorry, this mouse is a little bit problematic. So start bringing my mouse next time. Please do.
Wait, how do you determine the waste centroid again?
So for these slides, we just took a distance from not somewhat central.
Yeah.
To all of the, oh, there it is, thank you. Yeah, 20 miles from Way Centroid.
And the waste centroid, that like, is it landfill for in all when you're calculating it?
We're using the landfill as the way.
For all of the
For measuring those distances, yes.
So the, way back when we were developing transfer stations, thinking about not landfill, and so URS calculated the waste centroid, and the actual waste centroid, looking at where it's generated on the county, was at the intersection of Highway 20 and 27th Street. So not landfills, you can use that and be pretty darn close.
Right.
At least that was a centroid back then. Now with all the population growth, who knows where that might creep to, but everything's gonna come into not landfill in the Bend area, so.
School down.
Yeah, another way that we look at it is the average weighted miles from various transfer stations weighted by the haul volume. It's another way to look at it, accounting for the distance from Pine, sister transfer station from Negus. Okay, let's get back on track. Sorry, everybody. If you've got a replacement mouse, let's try that out. Okay, there we go. Looks like it's responding again. It's the battery, it's gotta be battery. Okay, so natural environment. BLM 97 site scored very well in this criteria. No wetlands and waters nearby, no map threatened or endangered species, wildlife area combining zone. There's one. I believe that's Pronghorn. Greater sage grouse.
Talking about like people that get lost in the golf course.
Yeah, from our residents. No. Well, we have notes on that elsewhere. But there is a wildlife area combining zone here or nearby. I think that's why it would be other one. It's nearby, but not on site as with the others. I think that's it.
Yeah, talking to ODFW, the main concern would be on the west side of 97. If there's any environmental concern,
For deer winter, right?
yeah, deer, almost anything, stuff.
And I think we found even the new proposed areas part of the wildlife area combining zone expansion. Those didn't affect this site.
That's all on the west side of.
So there is no wildlife area combining zone on this proposed property, but within a certain number of miles from there. Out beyond 3 or so. The greater sage grouse area combining zone is far from the site. And yeah, scored well in that. So this one definitely stands out in terms of natural environment. As you can imagine, it's a more developed area. It's near the highway, near the train tracks, and surrounded by more development. So it's at the same level of natural habitat around Highway 97.
What was the route of this, you go back versus right now? I knew why it was so low.
Ooh. Trying to remember all the notes we have behind these scores.
The sage grouse and the wildlife combining zone.
Mhm. Yeah, there's wildlife combining zones on site at Moonpit. And if it's not on site, it's nearby or within a distance. With the sage grouse area combining zone. But I can follow up with you later with the table and all the comments. The report will also document all this in detail. So for land use, there are several different factors considered here under the land use category. Proximity to airports, it's great, and really overall, this site scored the best. Site zoning is great, actually, given that it's EFU, which does allow landfilling as conditional use. Adjacent land use impacts is based on these 4 sub-criteria: existing adjacent use, planned adjacent use, distance nearest residence, near public road, scored well in terms of those. Site visibility and aesthetic impact did score well in terms of those, given that there's a lot of viewpoints near the site and the ability to see landfill at certain locations. Remoteness didn't do well there. And haul route impacts scored well, given that the access is the interchange by Tumalo Road, shoots Pleasant Ridge Road then, so not running through residential areas. And then on-site land use impacts, there's nothing there, vacant land, so scored a 5. There's potential for cultural resources on the site. I believe there's a historic wagon trail or something.
And it avoids it.
It avoids it. This is perhaps a mile from that.
The old Remington Road.
So, yeah, we thought it was interesting to see.
Well, you can go back, why is this 401?
Oh, yeah, sorry, I skipped that one. I'll try to explain. So with this one didn't turn out to be a differentiator between sites, but it was suggested that we create a criteria that looked at the potential for addressing transportation system needs along with the landfill development. And there wasn't found to be a benefit in this case. Like say an interchange that needed to be built anyway. Like exactly, yep, for transportation improvements. So this is a summary that shows all 3 of them in comparison and how those different categories come together to create a total weighted score based on these weightings for each criteria. And then you can see how those stack up here in the graph. And so it does appear to be, based on the criteria, a good potential site, candidate site. And so this is, again, one of 3 lenses, at least 3 lenses to look at these sites through. The next one is comparative cost factor analysis. And so talked about this last month, but there are 5 main cost factors identified with different weights that affect the cost to develop and operate a solid waste management facility. Excavation is a big one, waste hauling, road infrastructure, power infrastructure, and water infrastructure. You may remember some of the scores from these other sites. Highway 97 BLM stands in the middle of this pack, so to speak. And higher scoring means represents a lower cost to develop and operate. And then a lower score represents higher cost. So it kind of lines up with the criteria scoring.
So Moonpit is really high because it's already been dug out.
Basically,
There's a road to it.
there's water on site. Power infrastructure is low because there isn't existing power infrastructure nearby. There are options for developing off-grid power sources. Variety of options there. But yeah, so Moonpit wins on this one. A big factor for Highway 97 BLM with this is the excavation cost. Touched on this briefly before. This could be a 1 or it could be a 3 or a 4, generally speaking. again, depending on whether the rock could be mined and have an economic benefit to help offset the excavation costs. Given that that's not a given, we've scored this as a 1. And you see how it kind of lines up with the Roth sites. Just behind Roth East, but perhaps better than Roth West in terms of the cost factor analysis.
But if that was a 2 or a 3, that would. Go up.
Yeah, very well could. Power infrastructure costs would be minimal, given the proximity there. Road infrastructure costs, we have this as a 3 because, rail crossings, never an easy task. But otherwise, I mean, the access roads and the interchange there facilitates good transportation access. And haul costs are very low for that one, being the most centrally located site in the mix here. So yeah, based on this cost factor analysis, we estimate that Moon Pit would be the least to develop and operate. And then the DSL north and south sides would be the most expensive to develop and to operate. And then Roth West, Roth East, and Highway 97 generally are expected to fall somewhere between those 2 extremes. And in the next phase, we do plan.
I was on this, Ryan, I was just going to add back to the point of excavation and the value and the cost of that. If the BLM site was able to operate the same way Moon Pit was, so excavation through mining, it would actually come in at a score that's pretty much the same as Moon Pit. And that just shows you what a significance the excavation has on the cost of an operation. And that truly is, and it may be even a greater percentage of the cost of an operation like this, especially since it's rock.
It's a great point. Thanks, Wyatt.
Ryan, one quick question. This is Keith. So on Moon Pit is showing the excavation cost up to a 5. Does that mean it's the best because it's already been excavated for the most part, or is a 5 showing? I assume that's what that means, correct?
That's right. Yep.
Okay.
So it's a little bit inverse: higher score, lower cost; lower score, higher cost. Higher score means better in terms of
cost. Thanks.
Yeah. And we do plan in the next phase 2, with the sites that are chosen to move forward, to provide more detailed cost estimates for development and operation with rough order of magnitude dollar figures tied to this. But at this level, we felt this was appropriate to differentiate the sites and compare them in terms of these factors without getting too far into the weeds. So residential proximity analysis. Definitely hear and understand that a solid waste management facility could negatively impact nearby residences. And residents are concerned about that, understandably. Some of the concerns we've heard throughout this process include haul truck traffic, noise, dust, air pollution, odors, litter, invasive species, groundwater contamination, scenic impacts, and decreased property value. So we acknowledge those concerns, and also want to note that it's a key part of this whole process is mitigating those potential impacts, and there are many BMPs that can limit.
I think at the last meeting we added wildlife to that. Was suggested.
Yeah. Yeah. But with regard to residential impacts, residents specifically for this one. But yeah, Moon Pit site, you can see there's one that's within 2 miles and none within 2 miles. There were 2 that were pointed out to us, 2 alleged dwellings, but after looking further into those, we found that those were not legitimate dwellings on record with the county. And so those aren't shown here. But there's one official permitted primary dwelling here. And then Roth West and East sites, you can see here, those, and we have the quantities in a later slide. You can see generally how Rock East presents less residential impacts than Rock West. And for those of us that went out there to the site, we're able to see, at least I noticed a distinct difference between the visibility of this area from Rock East compared to Rock West. I mean, Rock West is out in the open, down by the road. But this one's kind of further away. And then these two sites, minimal residential impacts out there. Now, Highway 97 BLM. We weren't able to map known residences for this site because of the sheer magnitude. The process of going through and vetting each of those and checking the dial improvement reports and confirming that there's a primary dwelling on there is pretty arduous. But we were able to see here in general kind of where some of the residences are within 1 mile. It's a strip of homes here on Longview that would be included in that 1 mile. There's a couple farm dwellings here, perhaps one by the gun club. A couple more rural properties there. And then this, I'm not sure if this is a part of Boonesboro or a separate subdivision, but there's some dispersed.
Yeah, there's nothing.
Oh, down here? Yeah. Okay. So that's in the 2 mile buffer, but you can see once we get into 2 miles, start to get a slice of pronghorn, a couple platted streets there. North end of Boonesboro, some homes here, and then just about half of the platted lots on Longview. I think it's worth noting that there are existing barriers between Longview and BLM site that already kind of impact, I guess, the look and feel of this area. Highway 97 and the constant noise from there and the train, I think, give a bit of a reduced connection perhaps between these two areas. Certainly there's views, but perhaps not much dog walking or from residents here, in BLM. Not to say that it doesn't matter. I just wanted to point out there is that natural kind of barrier that's there, 2 barriers. And then, yeah. So generally though, I think it's safe to say there's at least 50 residences within 1 mile.
It's just about 72 over there.
Yeah, and I apologize for the discrepancy. There's that was based on the list of situs addresses within that. A portion of those are vacant properties that do have a situs address or a commercial property. And so it could be 10 to 30% of those that fall off. And don't and aren't confirmed as primary residences. And then I think we can say there's at least 300 residences within 2 miles. And as
You also look at the 1/4 and 1/2 mile if you did the other sites.
I don't believe that we did that with the other sites.
No, I think the 1/4 mile lot was just used as an offset for public roads and water wells.
That's right.
Well, and earlier that was the criteria. The sites near landfill. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's the very minimum criteria.
County code.
Yep, county code.
So is there anything within the 1/4 mile?
No, I don't think so. No, the workable site area for all sites is drawn to ensure that at least the minimum buffers from private property are met, which is 500 feet, 100 feet from public land, but then also 1/4 mile from adjacent roads and adjacent dwellings.
How about 1/2 mile?
That wasn't uses.
We're just looking at it, would it just be the 1 or 2? 1/2 mile from the blue.
I think 1/2 mile takes you from the edge of the blue to 97.
Oh, it does.
Yeah, approximately.
Yeah, I was thinking it.
0.47 miles.
So there's right along there, there's several.
So
There are
so
a couple.
within the red zone there to the west, sorry, to the east of 97. there's a few residences there down.
Yep.
right
Yeah,
there,
it's the
and a little
whistle
farther south, and there are residences to the north as well, where that.
There might be one.
I think there's the sheriff's posse is in there, but that's.
Yeah.
Sheriff's posse's there.
And the rest to the north between the tracks and 97, I think is zone 3 BLM.
Yeah.
If I remember right.
Yeah, this
And
is
the
the
Rock
closest
Run
one.
Club stuff, that's,
It's right next to the Whistle Stop Garden Center.
Yeah, almost all that land to the north within that mile zone is either BLM or state
Or irrigation district.
or COID.
the Rock Run Club.
Yeah.
That's up here to the north. Right. There it is.
Right.
You've already talked to them.
But, you know, we have not because we're not sure how this is gonna go.
So in terms of, we went with this site in the future, the Gun Club and those ones by the Whistle Stop would be the main places we'd have to contact.
Oh. Well, we would contact everyone in these areas here, but I think until we, it's hard to define when that point is until we get to a point where we have some level of confidence that this is gonna be a viable approach. We're just not at that point yet. The commissioners reached out to the elected officials and, you know, there was an election year coming up, so that may postpone things further here.
Do you guys think that if you applied the same filter to the current landfill, would it look similar as far as residences?
I would expect there to be more residents.
Yeah, there's more. But a lot of those have also, well, a certain number of them have moved in since the landfill was.
Yeah, I
in
understand
operation.
that. I'm just wondering.
And didn't you guys say that BLM site was solid rock? That is a major concern. When the team looked at the well logs for wells in the vicinity, it's rock. And not landfill, so roughly a third of my landfill did not have surface basalt on it. In the very early days of building the landfill, they were able to excavate down 60 or 80 feet before hitting any rock. As we migrated to the west, we started hitting rock. So that condition can change over a very short distance. And all we're doing at this point is inferring what the conditions are based on well logs out there. Generally, the area is a lot of rock and a lot of rock outcroppings. There might be some shallow areas that have accumulated soil over geologic time, but between the residences and soil conditions, soil availability out there, those could be two substantial hurdles for us. And again, we're not at a point where we can make that kind of decision yet. Steve, right?
Yeah, I would just ask about the other BLM site on Powell Butte Highway. If maybe there wasn't as many residences around that specific area versus this area, and why would you not choose the Powell Butte Highway?
You know, we could very well go that way. When we met with BLM, they asked to focus on a single site from a solid waste standpoint. This makes a heck of a lot of sense. But some of these things we're seeing during the screening process, we may want to revisit the other site.
I will also comment in the discussion with them, this is a bit more disturbed land off of Powell Butte. That area is, there's a lot of contiguous land out there that they would have more concerns that this would be kind of an introduction interrupting a broader kind of natural area. So this is more disturbed, so would be of a bit more potential interest in disposal.
So
Rather
the
than
of the
the other
three
two
sites,
sites.
so of the three sites from BLM perspective, this is also their favorite.
Yes,
Yes.
yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, yeah.
Now, aren't there more residences closer to that other property? Or I'm not-
There are some.
There's some, we didn't do the 2 mile. But there are larger ranges, I think, out there, but it's mostly BLM property out there.
To the east is Brasada in Crook County, and some other subdivisions that are just on the county line.
Will transfer station trash go to the Knott's landfill and then to the landfill, or could it potentially go direct from the transfer stations to this site?
Yeah, the intention is that we wouldn't, all refuse would be coming from the areas that they're currently coming from, so Redmond transfer would go direct to the landfill.
So then as far as waste, the centroid, this would actually be very centrally located, maybe even more so than Knox landfill.
Yeah. Yeah, we could actually even have, for this one, route trucks could potentially go directly as opposed to go to transfer stations.
Less handling of the garbage,
Yeah, less
shorter haul
handling.
distance.
How many trucks are we talking like per day going back and forth with any of these locations?
If it's transfer traffic, where it's being handled, pushed into a larger trailer, not the route trucks, it would be about 50 trucks a day with current volumes, 40 to 50. If it's collection routes, it probably is closer to 100, 125. All these places we're looking at though would be limited access, so it would only be for either the collection trucks or the transfer trailers, not public use.
So about 50 trucks going back and forth, so maybe 100 trips a day out and back.
Yeah, if an out and back is 2 trips, it would be 100 trips a day.
Are there any stats on the Knox landfill water usage, like how much water they use for dust abatement and just general landfill operations?
Yeah, that was included in some of the early presentations. Yeah, we're not even got water out there. So all that water is metered and we pay for it. So we also have a substantial amount of irrigation. Compost area uses water as well. But yeah, we did gather that data that was included in the analysis at some point in the past year.
And the BLM, what would you do about water?
To develop a well, just like some of the other potential sites.
Chad, can you get permission from BLM to do some geological studies on the rock out there? Would they give you permission?
I'm not sure when we would be able to do that again. You know, this site really, this is being discussed truly in concept here. That this acquisition process is very tenuous. And again, it's out of our control to do so. Everything we're talking about here is theoretical and conceptual at this point. If it looks like we're going to be getting some traction, then we'll approach that. We asked a parametrics to just do a broadside screening on this. Yeah, we're just simply, this is really in its infancy here.
But yeah, that's anticipated to be a part of the next phase for the sites that are selected, site due diligence studies. Yeah. So a summary of the residential impacts, without giving discrete numbers here, I think we can tell that there is the largest impact to residential, or the most residences in proximity to the Highway 97 site by a long shot. Moon Pit being on the low end in terms of residential proximity. Rock East also fairly low, but in the middle, and then yeah, Highway 97 BLM having the most. But that's also part of the trade-off of being centrally located and the benefits there, and having less environmental impacts, being more centrally located in developed areas. But yeah, that's definitely a challenge with this site worth acknowledging and addressing. So at this point in the presentation, we'd like to open it up to the SWAC to hear from you, from SWAC members, about impressions from the site visits, what you observed.
Can I ask one question about the BLM site?
Sure.
So what I heard so far, it's not really a red flag. Maybe the rock would be the closest to the basalt for the BLM site. To me, almost every other site, except maybe the Moon Pit, possibly, has a major red flag. I mean, going back to the original 13, what it could be airport or whatever.
I will say the Moon Pit does have what you may classify as a red flag is ownership.
Okay.
Yeah, that is a legal issue to deal with. Us not owning property that we're going to be disposing of waste on.
Because of liability.
There's liabilities, there's operational considerations with that as well, so rely on them for material.
So looking at it from a red flag standpoint, does the BLM site, what would be the red flag there, the major no-go?
Soil availability,
Soil.
that's a huge part of landfill operations.
And the number of residences, even though.
You know, I should minimize that as well.
We were to notify all of those residents, I think we would hear all sorts of.
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
You have to go back to the county.
Yeah, and because it is, again, it's strictly a conceptual idea at this point here. I don't want to alarm people unnecessarily. This could very well change on a very short time.
And the acquisition's kind of a red flag as well.
Yeah, BLM site has hurdles. Yeah, I think I made a statement earlier in this morning's meeting is that there is no perfect site out there. Every site has challenges of one sort or another.
I just want to step in real quick. This is Keith to say I really appreciate the tour last week. I thought it was great to actually put boots on the ground and be out there on site. And I kind of agree with some of the comments we've been talking about today between Roth East and Roth West. I do think Roth East is a better location just based on the less number of individual properties out there where there's residences tied to them. So you have more of a buffer. Also, you have a buffer from Pine Mountain Observatory because of you won't be able to see a vantage point from the observatory down into the landfill per se. I agree, though, I think Moon Pit, because of the excavation cost, is a lot less expensive, but the not having ownership is a huge challenge for that site. And it's up to the county whether that's something they're willing to go into a long-term lease or not. Because I think from what we could tell from being out there in Moon Pit, they're very interested in the county utilizing that land, which would also benefit them as well. So there's some of my comments.
That issue will be subject to further discussion, I'm sure.
Do we have any idea what that long-term lease would cost?
We have not had that level of discussion.
So
We
don't
did
know.
ask them outright if they want to sell to us. But resounding, although Scott Carlson made a comment at a recent meeting that got me to think there was possibly some wiggle room there, but we need to sit down and if the Moon Pit advances to the next phase, which is the decision we're going to be making today, we'll have to sit down and have some very serious conversation regarding that whole concept.
Because part of that's gonna be determining the cost. I think that we understand all that.
Correct.
It would seem like there are some creative ways to think about phasing things. Based on how they will have to- I don't know if that's possible.
No, that's I think everything's going to be on the table.
I can offer my opinions. I can maybe let's go first. Go ahead. To me, the two DSL sites are set that for about 3-4 months. They were too far out there logistically, too expensive. Right next to prime sage grouse, avian predators would pretty much decimate sage grouse in the Deschutes County, parts of adjacent Cook County. And at least one of them is visible from the highway. I did actually run into the managers of the different kind of event, and they both said they're not interested in selling. They both said why the county keeps keeping that on the list. We told them we're not interested.
Which two are you talking about?
The two DSL sites.
But DSL has not given us, they've expressed their concerns to us, and this is going to be the decision today. Those are not privately owned, so I'm not sure if an individual is mistaken simply say we're not interested in selling.
Well, they said they said that they have expressed, and they talked to their supervisor in Salem, similar perspective. Their perspective is more that the county is going to try and ride over them with, legislation, which they'll legislate. So anyway, to me, there's too many red flags with the DSL side. I wouldn't even consider it. Either one of them. I think all the Milliken sites have a big problem with sage-grouse too because of avian predators. The Roth East might be the best of the bunch, but I would two. But I wouldn't, less impact on all the folks here. But to continue with one of those sites, we're going to have a lot of stressed out people continuing for months with that, and it's also far from, from the centroid. The Rock West is very visible from residences to Pine Mountain Road. And even Rock East, especially the upper part, it would be fairly visible from Highway 20. The lower part is not as much, but still visible, a couple of sites. We still kind of, you can still see the highway in 2 places. So to me, of the existing sites, there's only one that we are advancing, that's the. And even there, the wilderness folks are crucifying me for suggesting that, but I really think that can be mitigated more so than the issues with the other places.
And why not the BLM?
BLM really is not on the table for consideration. We're sharing information on the BLM site with you guys at this point because there's a possibility it will come into play.
But in order for it to even come into play, I'm sorry, Robin.
No, I was going to actually go to the same place you are.
Doesn't make, you have to evaluate it more to be able to understand if it actually is viable.
Correct.
Right? For
Yes.
all the reasons we've talked about today, so.
Right.
I understand.
We talked about it last month and it sounded like perhaps in the fall, like even in 6 months, like once we, and Chad, you can correct me, but that's what I thought we talked about last month, was just that like, because it might just not be an option at all at this point, and so it doesn't make sense to like advance it and spend money on it and make people think we're gonna go that way if the answer is just no, from the BLM. So it was like, we need to get a
But
few
it's not-
steps farther
it's
with
not-
the BLM.
But it's not no from the BLM.
Yeah, it's not.
That's
correct.
The no's coming
Yeah.
from Congress, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really.
Well, I
what
guess
it
just
boils
like the
down
level
to.
of feasibility of it, I
Yeah.
guess.
I guess
So we
I-
were hoping like
Yeah.
later in the process to get a little bit more assurance about that, and then we would roll it in later.
That's correct. You at some point, the term that we use is Mr. Chambers, we would on-ramp the site at a point if it does have viability. The whole concept of acquiring these BLM lands has been kind of an outlier in the process here, and we're looking at that. But
I guess where I'm kind of sort of going is for the discussion today, the sense from the committee, we agree that it should be explored.
oh yeah,
Even if it's they're viewing it somewhat differently,
Yeah, I would.
right?
Yeah, that's
From
where I
the
was.
message to the commissioners.
Yeah.
And as a committee, we can, agree to maybe disagree with the county staff.
sure.
Which is the way I feel also. I think Mike is sort of there almost. And I guess you even brought that up at the last meeting, but to me, we ought to go ahead with the BLM site, looking at it. And especially at least the soil and the residences to a certain extent to see how much of a red flag that's gonna be. Even if we don't do the rest of it. And I did also run into the BLM managers at a different event. And I asked them privately what they thought. I said, if you were on this committee as a private citizen, what would you do? And their answer was, I would go ahead with the site. They said, not officially, I can't say that. But it said, what, if the county needs some patience, one way or another, they'll get that site. What's the answer?
Patience within reason. We do have a fixed timeline for capacity.
So my vote would be to go with the Moon Pit and the BLM site for comparison as to how far along in the BLM. We could discuss that as a committee, I guess, if the county's not willing to go full board.
So clarification, it's not that we don't want to go full board, it's just the process that the county can do to affect this has a limit. And when it gets to the legislators, it's in their ballpark. I suppose the county could continue to lobby on a regular basis with them, but once the legislative process starts working on it, we really don't have a lot of influence.
But even the regular land exchange could happen, and I guess that's the county can look to see what we can do to extend the life of not landfill by a couple of years to allow that to happen. But it would work one way or the other, talking to the BLM folks.
Well, that was essentially the feedback we got.
So I think, and what I'm hearing a little bit on this, that soil and the residences turns out to be bigger than I think it will. We could spend all this time looking at these other sites And then our preferred site is really another place. And, in terms of spending money, we go look at the ROD sites or DSL. We're only gonna pick one anyway, so we're gonna spend money on a site that we're not gonna pick. No matter what, if you're gonna have more than one site.
So just to remind you of the process, so we are prepared to invest money in researching 2 to 3 additional sites. We can't just limit ourselves to a single site right now. We need to have those options available to make that final decision. So, yeah, I appreciate the dollars and cents part of this thing, but part of this process is to be doing this more detailed evaluation on more than a single site.
My opinion is I would make a second site.
So you support Moon Pit?
I would, well, going forward, I would prefer the BLM site.
Right.
But I would support it as a second site, because it's, to me, it has at least red flags, it's already a hole in the ground. Except for the logistical part of buying it, or leasing it as to whether it's afford it, depending on what they ask.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that's involved, the dollars and cents are part of it, also the liability side. That's a.
It probably would have a lesser impact on sage grouse than anything else, especially cancer, which to me is a big factor. We've got a species that we don't want to put on the nature list, it's come close. The right political environment to go there, and that'll really hamper impact populations out there.
Thanks, Robert. I mean, I think probably these 2 sites, Moon Pit and Rock East, continue to be on. My preference is not Rock East is the ultimate choice. I don't really, more and more don't like the idea of having sites like this that are more remote and so farther and farther away from the waste centrally, and that are basically undisturbed. I do have some concerns. Do we know enough about how this whole area functions for my wildlife migratory purposes, and so I want to involve around there. I think of the 2 rock sites, this one is a little bit more protected and seems a little bit more out of the wind the day that we were there. The visual impacts are lower. But I think we have to still keep this on the list of sites to get evaluated. I think it lets us see the range of options available to the community. And some of the value trade-offs around disturbed, undisturbed, distance, cost, all of that. And that's part of what this in the end is going to be about. It's not going to just be some scoring thing. And the commissioners are going to have to make a difficult decision around some of these trade-offs. So I tend to prefer the Moon Pit site or the BLM site for the reasons that you said as well, but it has lots of challenges. And I do think we have to do enough due diligence on that site, even early in the process, to know that it even makes sense for us to pursue, right? We don't want to be going to Congress and asking for an act. Congress, we're not clear that this makes sense, or that within the trade-offs available to us with the different sites, this one is a good choice. It's not perfect, no. I think the Moon Pit site, it's potentially a really good site, but it poses some real challenges. I think the ownership issues are very real, and the liability issues, and that's the part we're going to have to get creative with the current owners to see how that can get worked out. That's problematic for the liability risks if you don't have it, just to set up for lawsuits, frankly. There's a problem. Lots of forces. So I would support these 2 going forward. To be clear that my personal preference is not the Rock East site, but I think it's part of this to continue to be evaluated.
I think on the, I was thinking about the ownership thing on that Rock and Moon Pit. And that it's also in their interest for this to be a landfill. That's their reclamation plan.
Yeah, right.
Otherwise, they have a big cost. So the county does that with a little bargaining.
No question about it. Yeah, that's something Tim and I have discussed. Yeah.
And the Rock East side and west side, they haven't brought up the paragliders. They haven't said anything so far, but you're standing on top of the actual peak that's that's labeled Pine Mountain, you're looking straight down at both sides. Not the observatory, but the more barren one that they jump off of. And so that would really impact that whole sport.
Yeah, I think I generally agree with what's been said. I don't think we have the luxury of eliminating the Roth sites because we just don't have that many options, so we should continue to look into them, and I think of the two, the Roth site makes more sense. For what you stated. And same thing with the moon pit, like the concept is really nice, but the ownership is such a significant issue that it would really need to be able to be worked out. And hopefully we can bring the BLM one on, but it's kind of a good point, like, do we need to do a certain level? I don't know if we can, but like, if we want to do a certain level of additional due diligence there before we even make the ask of Congress, because what if we make the ask, it's rolled into the analysis and we're like, never mind. So I know, I mean, there's no right answer for how to do that, but.
Yeah, so I mentioned Tim in our meeting with Phil Chang after this meeting here, and we're gonna have that conversation with him and get his feel for it and share that with the other commissioners as well.
I think that's a good point. It'd be really embarrassing to get their support and then say, well, we found something.
Oh, yeah.
And that, yeah, and maybe it would just be like looking into the excavation part of it, maybe not like a full assessment, but just some of those big issues. Like maybe we could take a further step on those. I don't know what would go into that, and we need some sort of access to something that we couldn't get, but.
Yeah, the timing and logistics are a little bit difficult with the BLM site. We want to push this forward all of a sudden and say, oh, never mind.
And the election year could definitely be a problem.
So how long does that process normally take?
The RPP process is 6 to 10 years or more, and there's a lot of pitfalls in it because certain parts of the process have shelf lives to them. When you're doing the property valuation, when you do that, that has was it a 1 year shelf life, and so you have to do that process all over again. And it was one of the environmental reviews has a limited shelf life as well. So if there's an appeal or delay somewhere in the process, some of the efforts you've expended has to be done at a second time. And all those things tend to push it out. So 6 to 10 years, and the actual answer was 6 to 10 years or more.
So we're not even viable.
To go through the normal process that's authorized under the Recreation Public Purposes Act. The process we're looking at is kind of a short circuit going through the legislative process to get a federal law passed to grant that land.
Fastest they say to do that is a year, most likely it'll be longer than that. It'll be a couple of years.
Yeah. So I think the ask of the committee today is to advance a short list of the 5 current sites we have, the 2 DSLs, the 2 lots, which 2 or 3 sites we want to move forward.
As far we're hearing.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree.
Keith, if you're still on board, do you have any additional thoughts?
After listening to everyone's comments, I think that I agree with Robin and Mike and everyone else. I think that the direction you're talking about going makes the most sense for these sites that are there. And I agree that we can't limit ourselves to just one and hope that it, fingers crossed that it works out. So we definitely have to keep our options open. But I would really be interested to hear what Phil Chang has to say today once you guys meet with him to find out the viability of the BLM site, because I think that's a huge decision if we can get his support.
Yeah, we're at the end of the meeting, we're kind of talking about the meeting schedule in the coming months because things are going to start tapering from the need for swag involvement. The team rolls up their sleeves and gets on site here, and if need be, we can follow up with an email to the committee regarding conversations with Commissioner Chang.
Ryan, can you hit the chat, see what's?
That'd be great. Thank you.
Chris, I see a chat from you agreed, or is that in response to this discussion here regarding Moon Pit and Roth East, or do you have more you want to share with us there?
Yeah, that was based on initial feedback that Keith had provided, just kind of reiterating thanks to the county and folks that were able to take us out and let us check out the sites. It was really helpful for my understanding of some of the benefits and drawbacks of each of the locations that have been proposed. And I think just echoing the rest of the SWAC, the Moon Pit has some strengths and a couple weaknesses, Roth East as well. I think Roth West was something that I wasn't necessarily interested in moving forward with. And then just reiterating optimism around that BLM site and wanting to learn more about it before making a final decision.
Just want to acknowledge a comment from Dr. Austin here. Roth property has been a regular animal grazing area, and yes, photos they can provide. Paul Bertagna, any thoughts, comments from you?
Yeah, I think we got to keep Roth East on the table. It would work. It's definitely remote enough that I don't think it would affect any of the neighbors out there. And, it does have the longer transport back to Knott, but all in all, the site would work. And then the Moon Pit site, you guys would be looking at a long-term marriage with no way out. So it's going to be a tough negotiation to really work through, because it's going to be multi-generational, right? So a lot of things can happen, and yeah, you don't want to be 20, 30, 50 years down the road and have there be a unresolvable issue. So other than that, yeah, I appreciated the site visits, and both those sites would definitely work.
Okay, great. But thanks, Paul. What else? Have any comments or thoughts I'd like to share?
I'm curious, if it's found that the BLM 97 BLM site is feasible in terms of acquisition, do any SWAC members believe we should not pursue the site further, or some discussion around?
It's solid rock, partner. You can't sell, the county can't sell the rock. Crook County operates landfill on solid rock. It does what?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's we are acknowledging the rock is a challenge, but we have not fully assessed what those true conditions are. Like I said, at non-landfill, you can go at once location, put a shovel in the ground, hit rock, and move it across the site and be able to dig down 80 feet or more and not hit rock. So it's just extremely variable, and there's ways to make that assessment and determination.
In terms of the website, have we got any feedback from Lori or Cliff Betts?
I have not spoken with him directly. We did share information with one of Lori's staff members, some maps and discussion points on that. And I believe it's either Commissioner Adair or Commissioner Bethone or both had approached Betts's office directly.
But no actual feedback from either office at this point.
Feedback in terms of
whether they'd be willing to work with this.
I believe they are, yes.
Oh, good, okay. Awesome.
So do we want to have any motion on moving a short list of sites forward here?
I move that we advance the Roth site.
So Mike Riley moves to advance the Roth East and Moon Pit sites. Do we have
DSL?
Remove DSL and remove Roth West? Okay. Do we have a second?
Chris Ogren, second.
Okay.
Chris or Cassie got the second in on there, so you can listen to the recording.
I'd like to offer an amendment. I think the rest of the committee doesn't agree with me on this, but as I said, I can't support a lot of these. I don't need any more information to say it's a no for me. Based on wildlife, sage grouse, and just affecting the overall recreational use. The site is not in it's not that degraded. It's a decent sagebrush habitat, a decent sagebrush step habitat. And so, and I disagree with the county. I would go ahead as much as possible with the BLM site. Those would be my two sites. So the amendment I'm offering is that we do the Moon Pit site, and we go as far as we can with the BLM site, especially the soil, the salt, and the residences.
I think maybe we should have that be a separate motion to the
It would be a
commissioners,
separate motion.
because I mean, technically.
Well, it could be, but I guess I'm not in favor of broadleaves. That's why.
I understand, I'm just
So
saying,
making
take the
an
BLM thing out and let's just talk about the sites that have been on the list so far, and then let's make a different motion around the BLM site, if that's okay.
Okay, well, then my motion would be that we only consider the.
Well,
Yeah, my amendment.
we got,
We have a motion on the table, so, and it's been seconded, so we're having discussion, so now we have an amendment.
Have an
to
amendment.
the
So you have to
motion. So
vote
does
on it.
anybody have a second to Robin's motion?
so Robin's motion is to drop Rock East and only have the Moon Pit on the active site list for lack of a better term.
So is there a second?
There's no second on Robin's motion, so we have a second on the
We have a second on the original motion, so does anybody else want to discuss it
Any other
further, or any
discussion?
other amendments?
all in favor,
Aye.
Aye.
opposed? We have Robin opposes, and the balance of the committee that is present supported. So that motion move will advance forward with Moon Pit and Rock East for further evaluation.
And then maybe the second motion is that I think we should seriously pursue the BLM site. And do some amount of due diligence to make sure we're clear.
Yeah, I think there's two things we probably got to look at pretty seriously, and this kind of reflects back on Lynn's question. We can request the BLM to give us permission to get out on that site. We can do some geophysics on it to take a look at the soil and rock conditions on there. So we can.
What about the residences? You don't want that to be also come up later.
I don't want to have a conversation, starting with Commissioner Chang today about that, the number of residents nearby. But if that is an immediate red flag, then maybe we take a look at one of the alternate BLM sites. I mean, I think if we're going to move forward at some point in the not too distant future, we need to do a release to those residents in the 1 or 2 miles.
Yeah, I would do at least a 1 mile. 2 mile, but that's a lot of people on the other side of that, so. So I guess, I don't know if you made a motion or not.
Yeah, I'm moving that we recommend to the commissioners that we actively look into or, pursue the BLM site and do some amount of due diligence on the characteristics of the site and do some outreach. Like we've done at the other sites, so that people feel like they're.
Well, our outreach was a little bit lacking on the first round. But yeah, we're gonna be doing it differently here. We only notified adjacent neighbors, formally notified adjacent neighbors on this first round.
I would say go at least a mile.
Are you guys thinking we should do notify, do that outreach now, soon? Because I guess my only concern is if we're gonna go quiet on the SWAC meetings for a period of time, I wouldn't want to notify a bunch of people and then have them have nowhere to go for information, because I think once we notify people, we have to be prepared to kind of do a lot of it, kind of the same, just discussion and education we've been doing for the previous one. So I would just want to think about that, get a lot of people alarmed, and then it'd be really frustrating if we don't
I think
have.
we're gonna have people alarmed already.
No, I know, but I guess at least we
coverage
have
of
a
this.
lot of people who have been attending and they kind of see where we are in the process,
Yeah.
and so it's okay, if we take a few months off because we're doing the analysis. Not everyone has followed every step, but.
Yeah.
So that would be I think just thinking about when we do the outreach and making sure we can do. We're prepared to be doing the follow-up necessary. And maybe that would, presumably, I guess it would just, if there's no SWAC meetings for a few months, it would just be a lot of the staff probably to be doing a lot of that individually.
There's no reason we couldn't have SWAC.
No, there isn't. We can certainly, if we do a notice, we do a 1 mile notice, and we're hearing a lot, we can certainly
Yeah.
call for the next meeting, SWAC meeting next month.
Yeah,
The
so I guess
meetings
just
are
acknowledging
scheduled.
that if we
Yeah,
do that
yeah.
outreach, it might mean adjusting
Right.
the process over the next few
But I
months.
think that knowing that sooner than later is better. Look what happened with Dodd and Ricker. As soon as we announced it. We wanted to drop it.
Well, they were dropped for airport consideration.
Right, but that was raised by.
Yeah.
By the people who came to the meeting.
No,
There's also some discussion about when we're doing the next set of public outreach, right? On these sites. And
well, then, now that we've established, we have 2 sites, 2 official sites for further consideration, we're gonna be doing a much more broader, well, there's not many residents impacted. We'll do the 1 and 2 mile notification on those 2 sites.
But I guess, so, maybe we'll get to another topic, but if that next piece of outreach isn't until next fall, that was my understanding, is that we were talking about sometime in the fall being the next time we do public outreach after this point. My inclination, especially if we're bringing in the BLM piece, is that we do something sooner.
Oh, yeah, no, I was
Much-
assuming getting the
much
mailings out the next week or 2.
Right, but that we do some kind of like either another SWAC meeting or sort of a public information, like sharing information about the 3 sites, and here's why we came to these conclusions. Here's some of the comparative differences between the sites. It's just a little bit more informational, because I think we're gonna have a whole other round of people who are gonna enter into the process and not understand how we got here. And surface more concerns, and allow us to kind of introduce where we're going in a little more detailed way at this point in time. So I think we should do that in the next couple of months, the latest, especially if we're doing some of this notice stuff. So just to back up, I'm not sure if I got a second on that motion or on the BLM site.
Yeah, I would second it as long as we are gonna go ahead with the public, at least within a month involvement.
Yeah.
Not wait till fall.
So it include the due diligence on the site itself plus some public involvement. Yeah. We got a second on that.
I'll second.
If the committee agree that we're sort of making that recommendation to the commissioners.
Well, I think that recommendation is to the solid waste department too.
Yeah,
And we'll let the board know what we're up to. And, we have,
Yeah, so I have it written as move forward on BLM property to actively conduct due diligence and to look at moving the procurement process forward and do the public outreach through 1 mile notice to adjacent and your properties.
it's gonna restate it too. Yeah.
So any further discussion?
Yeah, any further discussion on this? This motion?
Agreed.
My only question with that is, what do we mean by due diligence? The full scope that would be involved with the other sites, or like a partial?
I think a partial due diligence that would allow us to make the recommendation to move it forward and actually move into the congressional
Got it.
realm.
Giving you guys discretion to kind of figure that out.
Yeah.
Do enough that we can help. Like, really does make some sense.
Yeah. I think that there's 2 focuses, the residential impact of the soil. There may be some other things that come up during that process. We may have to look at, but I think those are the 2 I see as the bigger focus.
So I have a question. Will we have resident communication after the determination is made on the viability of the site, or?
No, I think it would be concurrent, it would let folks know that we are doing some due diligence on the site.
So any further discussion of that motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? I should make you the chair.
Trying to learn.
You're getting good at it. Thank you, Mike.
Okay, Chris, well,
Yeah.
We have, you pull in the chat real quick, then we'll chat.
is he still out there?
Chris, are you still there?
In favor.
Okay, great.
Also, the east properties fall in the new incorporated city of Mountain View if the vote passes and approval. Does anybody know about this incorporated city of Mountain View?
Robin.
Where is?
Now, there's a landowner out there on Ford Road that's trying to get this petition going to start some city out there in Milliken. And I don't know of anyone that is for that at all.
That's not what, yeah.
Chad, one other request that I would have, since you're gonna be moving forward with those two, the East Roth and the Moon Pit, is that you're gonna do more mailings on the East Roth.
We'll expand out to a 2-mile radius.
Exactly, and so my request would be that you, as part of that expansion, you just include the whole Milliken community, which might end up going a little more than the 2 mile, it's the 2 sections. Map number 2015, section 04, and map number 2015, section 09. Those are the, yes, those ones on the left. Because if you just limit it to maybe like 2 miles, it might not include all those. See, I think you need to make sure that that whole section gets notified on the left.
That makes sense.
There's like 130 tax lots in there. That's my request, please.
Okay, so that's directed to the committee. We want to expand notification beyond the 1 and 2 mile radii.
For that, but did we finish that vote pass?
And
Yes.
And so just a cautionary note is, how do we treat one site different than another site? If we're gonna push out, given some consideration. The question that comes up is how far is far enough? Yeah. So I don't think we can exclude, if we're gonna do an expanded notification for one side, although I don't think we can exclude the other side.
And it'd be 2 miles from the property
Boundary, yes.
not from the platted.
Do you know offhand if you were to expand Moon Pit to like 3 miles, do you know if there's like a lot of additional residences or any?
There's you start capturing residences on Highway 20 between Rickard and the Badlands there, and I don't know how far up. Rickard Road would go. Yeah.
Oh, you mean for 3 miles? 3 mile buffer?
Well, I'm concerned to, well.
3 miles. Yeah, I mean, I think you're right.
Yeah.
And one thing we're
And it's
doing.
like, someone's always gonna be right on the other
Yeah,
side
right,
of the line.
right,
Yeah.
at least somebody-
Especially the BLM side.
And both properties would be notified, right? Because there'd be a notification that this site was screened and deemed and is not moving forward. So those sites
Approached it that way.
2 miles of Rock West would all get captured. And that's from the property boundary, which we take it from here. 2 miles is what is even larger than this footprint. So is that correct in our approach that we were not sure be following? So all the sites that are currently being screened, focus screened, the 6 we have, notifications will go out.
To the adjacent property, because those are the only ones we formally notify.
Okay, on the update on the decision.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we can certainly
Not
put
before.
a notice out to the interested parties, but there's several hundred people on that, and we'll certainly notify the property owners, DSL, the other couple of sites that were in the original one too.
So the 2 mile buffer was considered just for the sites that are advancing
forward.
That are going forward, yes, yes.
I think if you go from the property boundary, which is a good thing, I think if you went 2.5 miles, it would include the 2 sections there. It would be really close at 2.5 miles
But
to
you're-
notify all those property owners, those landowners in there.
so
If
it's
you
the
went only
property-
2 miles, it's gonna cut off half of those people of knowing there's a landfill coming in.
Those are based on the center of the active. area,
disposal footprint.
Right, so the property boundary there is that corner right there, if we're measuring to, you capture that, right?
Most likely.
Yeah, unit 2 miles.
It'll also most likely be on the news.
You know, the notification is not the only way people find out about things, like, so.
Practically
feel
speaking,
comfortable
I mean, folks here are probably talking to their neighbors. I would guess. I would think almost everybody there knows about.
So 2 miles. If we go
Well,
to
I don't assume that because there's a lot of landowners that are actually out of state that own a lot of these properties. They're not gonna find out through the news or through word of mouth. So that's why I would prefer that they all be notified in writing for those two sections.
It's coming off right there.
Right,
Yeah,
so
I
it
believe
will,
it's
it will
gonna be-
encompass 2 miles.
If they're all encompassed with 2 miles, great, but I don't think they're all gonna be. I've measured it out. And it seems like 2.5 miles would include all of them.
Did you measure from the center of the landfill or from the edge of the?
I've measured from the edge of the property boundary.
We're running a little low on time.
Yeah.
Thank you all. I have to step off. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Is the public able to access the slides that we're presenting today?
Every single meeting is posted, yes. Yeah, including the slideshow, as well as the meeting minutes, meeting agenda, any other. that was
I think we
provided.
should move forward, like notice as you guys have, as had been planned originally.
So 2 miles from the
property boundary.
property boundary. We used adjacent properties, so we were using the property boundary as the guidance on the first round here. So we would go 2 miles from the property boundary.
And we're gonna use that same approach to BLM, right?
Well, we're gonna go 1 mile with BLM on initial notification. That was the motion that you had. 1 mile notification and BLM is, that's a little bit different situation. It's not officially on
Because
the
it's not
list.
officially, so we're saying that the next, if it gets officially on the list, then we
Then we
can.
do, then we can do the 2 mile notice on. So I don't know if we need a motion here.
I know some people that live there that start to put posters up.
I don't think we do, because we're not changing. what we do.
I don't think.
Right, so we'll do the notification on Rock East and Moon Pit on a 2 mile distance from the property boundary.
And then the site's being dropped. Will just be adjacent property owners.
It's gonna be the same group of people we sent letters to, yes.
You're up.
Okay, I think we've talked about most of it. So just to let everyone know, the project story map is up. After today, we'll be doing updates to reflect the sites that you recommended coming off the list. So I don't know if anyone's gone there, but you can pull up, GIS interactive maps and scroll in and everything, and we'll be updating it this week. So we did want to talk about the upcoming open house. I think we decided, based on feedback from the committee from the last meeting, that we kind of target a fall open house. But then I think Mike had some concerns about not doing one now that we're moving forward with the short list of sites. So I guess, what do you folks think about that? I think we're flexible. I guess the main thing is, what type of feedback do we want to get on the short list of sites? Would it make sense to do one in June or something like that, and another one in the fall, or just wait till fall? I don't know. There was sort of like different opinions about what we should do.
Yeah, I think we had originally recommended to the fall with the idea, if we're not gonna be getting feedback,
Mhm.
like we're just telling people this is what we've done and the decision's been made, that can be like kind of a frustrating point. So that's why we had recommended it for the fall, when we could say, we could share the history, but also provide additional new details that from the more focus, from
From the
the
due diligence.
due diligence stuff.
Mhm.
So yeah, I kind of heard that, but we recommended adding a soon one in, so I don't feel really strongly either way, but just reminding us why we made that recommendation in the first place.
I guess my concern is just that, making sure that we're keeping people abreast of where we are and what's happening, and how the projects evolve. And if we are expanding the notice a little bit farther now, we give people one more chance to sort of flag for us sooner rather than later. So the concerns and issues are, to make sure those are addressed in any future due diligence. If we wait another 6 months or so, and then we find out there's a few more things that we haven't fully dug into, then we have to keep doing that. So generally a sooner rather than later sort of approach. I guess I've been assuming that we would also be talking about the BLM site, even though we know there's still a lot more work to get done. But we haven't introduced that into the community yet in any way for people to weigh in. So again, if we're waiting, then we, come to some conclusions and people feel like they haven't been heard, to set ourselves up for more conflict. So I guess I was assuming it's a package of 3, really. It's not just the 2.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit different in that, this is how we got to where we are. This is what we're considering and why. A little more chance for feedback and input that can be brought into it.
Are we kind of limited to like one open house?
I don't really know, Chad, but I feel like we should have an internal discussion about it and look at the timing of when more information is going to be available, and then come back to you.
Yeah.
Either with a memo or some recommendations.
But I think if we're doing a communication out to folks about the BLM property, and that's going to residents, and may go out to several hundred residents, potentially, or at least 75, but there will be a circumference of folks broader than that. who may want to comment on it. We should not wait till the fall for that.
Yeah.
That's gonna have to happen in May or June. So we'll have to probably find the space for that. It's, and whether that's a particularly dedicated focused discussion around the BLM property and those concerned residents, or if it's a broader conversation about all the sites.
I would way more than Mike. I think it should be broader about the 3 sites and
Yeah, I mean,
just go ahead.
here's what we did, here's the university, we already here on these, there's this other one that we're looking at, yet, but it's not quite in the same position in terms of understanding challenges.
Yeah, I think we'll have to do it in, like, really try and figure out the timing and plan for it, but we hear, acknowledge it should be before the fall, so it's probably in the May, June timeframe. May be a little too quick, but June might be a good time. We'll have to find the space large enough to accommodate an expectation of a number of folks.
And then maybe it's like June and then it's early winter.
Yeah.
And we're gonna have to time the communication out to the 2-mile radius for these other sites, so. I think in that communication, we're gonna wanna let them know there's a date and time for the public event, so we're gonna get on that pretty quick.
Okay, so we'll work on that. Yeah, okay. And I think, we've covered the rest, so.
And this is not a proposed land use.
Too much action. Okay, Chris is gone. Thanks, Chris.
Okay. Meeting adjourned. Thank you very much all. Appreciate your work involved in today on this. Thank you. Members of the public.
Thank you all.
Good. Taking the motion.